Well, if you notice, we're starting to get a lot of pictures up here, a lot of pictures up front. I would hope that for those of you that have been here for most of these Sundays, if not all the Sundays through this series, you'd be able to tell me what each picture stands for. Could some of you do that maybe? I see no heads going yes, up and down. Yeah? Some of you I would hope would be able to, but my goal was to put them all in order from where we started to where we are now, but that didn't quite work out. But I really encourage you to look at the pictures and to allow them to visually help you understand what we've been studying and looking at. Today we're going to be taking a leap. We're going to jump all the way to John chapter 18. So if you have your own Bibles, I encourage you to open up your Bible. If you don't own your own Bible, we do have Bibles in the lobby. I encourage you to grab a Bible back there and have your own. That way you can mark it all up. And it's interesting, I mentioned last week that at Family Christian Bookstore, they were on sale. And Tuesday night when I went to Wendy Wilcox's Bible study group, I think 2 or 3 of the people in the group had bought a Bible. I know there were 2 that had bought a Bible. So encourage you, if you don't have a Bible, really get your own Bible and get a good Bible. Can't afford one, we will help you buy a good Bible. This week what we're looking at, we're taking a jump from Jesus healing Lazarus, and that's what we looked at last week, way up in the top corner there on your left side. We have that picture way up there of Jesus bringing new life to Lazarus. And the end of that teaching, we just talked briefly about the idea that Christ is the one that brings new life. You know, sometimes we think when we're sharing or when we talk to somebody that we have to bring them new life, that we bring them Jesus, we bring them the Holy Spirit. No, we're the conduit. Christ and the Holy Spirit is the one that will bring new life. We're called to unbind them. Remember the story when Lazarus comes out, after Christ calls him out, Jesus says to those around, unbind him. Take off the wrappings on his head, the wrappings on his feet, the wrappings on his body. Unbind him. Free him. We need to, as a church, as Christians, free each other up from some of the rules that we have in order to be in relationship with Jesus. Well, we're taking the jump, and we're going to make a jump all the way to Pilate. So we're going to go all the way into like Holy Week. Okay, you with me on that? Pilate. Pilate was one of the governors of the land of Israel. Pilate started to become the governor in 26 A.D. He was appointed by Rome to be over the Hebrew people. Pilate, though, had he had an interesting life. It's believed that he was born from a prostitute and from a noble Roman man. So somehow he made his way up within the Roman society to be able to have the ability and the control to be sent by the emperor to be one of the governors of all the whole Roman Empire. But Pilate had a problem because the Jewish people tended to be a thorn in the flesh for the Romans, mainly because of their faith in Yahweh God and their strict faith in Yahweh God. When you look at the rest of the Roman world, which adopted a lot of the Greek mythology of gods with all of the pantheons of all the different gods. We're going to get into that a little bit later on with this teaching, but all the different gods. Well, Pilate shows up in 26 A.D. into Israel to become the governor. And there's 3 main things that take place before Jesus shows up on the scene with Pilate. The first one is Jerusalem is not the Roman, not the Roman capital of Israel. It's Caesarea. But what Pilate does when he shows up, he comes in with his soldiers with their standards, their flags, their standards, and on top of the flags, they had a bust of the emperor. Well, what does it say in the Old Testament? You should not make any graven image. No graven image. I think there were 4 governors before Pilate. They all took those busts off of their standards when they went into Jerusalem. Pilate did not. Pilate irated the religious leaders so much that they followed him back to Caesarea. and for 5 days they hounded him. Finally, on the 5th day, he called them all into the arena there at Caesarea, and he was going to have them killed, and the religious leaders, the Jewish leaders, bent over and they bared their necks, and they said, basically, go ahead and kill us. We do not want a graven image in Jerusalem. Strike one, Pilate lost. Jewish leaders won. 2, the water system in Jerusalem was not adequate for the size of the town that there was. So Pilate decided he would raid the temple offerings in order to construct a new aqueduct for water. Well, don't most of us feel like we already pay too much taxes? How would you feel if somebody from Texas Corner, some people that we've elected, if we had Joyce Neubauer, Joyce, if you, or Pendowski, where's Greg? Where'd Greg go? Did he slide out on us? Where is he? Yeah, Greg's supervisor. I mean, if you guys showed up and said, we're going to take church money to pay for some of the water system or pay for the sewer system in Texas Township, wouldn't we be like, whoa, wait a minute, no way. You're not taking the money that's been given in the offering. Well, that's what Pilate did. He took temple money to provide water for the people. Well, this this stirred up, of course, the Jewish people like it would us. So much so that what Pilate, I think it was at this time, what Pilate did then, he had some of his own Roman soldiers in the crowd, and at a certain time, he had the Roman soldiers kill some of the Jewish leaders. And in the New Testament, in the Gospels, it talks one place about how the blood in the temple with some martyrs were mixed with the sacrifices. That was from Pilate. Strike 2 against Pilate. Jewish leaders hate him. A third thing that Pilate did, was you would have thought that he would have learned with not to have the bust in Jerusalem. So what he does is he has shields made with the emperor's emblem on them, and takes them to Jerusalem and puts them in the castle, the Herodian that he stays in when he goes to Jerusalem. Man, you thought you would have learned once, but he does the same thing in a different way the second time. While the Jewish leaders get so irate about this, they send people to Rome, and the emperor calls Pilate back and says, quit bugging those Jewish people. Reprimands Pilate. Pilate has got himself in a quandary. Even after Christ's death and resurrection, Pilate does one more thing. The Samaritans have a small revolt, and Pilate goes into Samaria and he crushes it with severity, and he kills and crucifies many of the people within Samaria. So much so that the emperor calls him back home to Rome and says, you're not governor anymore. But you see, there's these 3 things that happen before Christ shows up on the scene, and the Jewish leaders hate Pilate. They hate Pilate. But they're going to use what took place prior to Jesus coming. So we read John chapter 18, verses 28. John 18, 28. Then the Jews led Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor, Pilate. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanliness, the Jews did not enter the palace. They wanted to be able to eat the Passover. Sort of ironic here. Passover's going on. Sabbath is taking place. The Jewish leaders want to keep their religion, but they're going to murder somebody. We ever have that within our life? You know, you show up to church and you're here to worship, but then you see somebody that you're upset with and you get mad at them. You know how quickly we can flip? We look at the Jewish leaders and say, wow, man, they're like a light switch on and off. They're in their religion, but then they get into their hatred or their what pulls them down so quickly. So they don't want to enter the palace. They wanted to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate comes out to them and asks, what charges are you bringing against this man? And they say, if he were not a criminal, why would we have brought him to you? Did they give a charge? Did they give a reason why they were bringing Jesus? I mean, we're going to see the reason why they're bringing him to Jesus is because Jesus blasphemed, saying that he was equal to God the Father. With all the I ams, we've talked about those, all the I ams that he was saying. Goes back to the land of, goes back to Moses with Yahweh God on Mount Sinai saying, I am who I am. Ego ami. Jesus says, I am equal to the Father. I'm part of the Trinity. And the religious leaders are bringing him to Pilate to crucify him, but they can't tell Pilate he needs to die because he says he's a God. They're not going to get any place. So they try to trick Pilate. Well, why would we have brought him if he wasn't a criminal? And Pilate says, take him yourself and judge him by your own law. Take him yourself and judge him by your own law. For the most part, from what I've read all these years, when the Roman society, Roman government would come and conquer another country, for the most part, they were pretty good to the other country. They would let the other country do some of their own rules, some of their own law, some of their own governance. But there were two things that another country could not do. Two things that a people that Rome had conquered, they could not do. Two. They could not execute somebody, and they could not excess taxes or take taxes. Rome said, we will be the executors. We will be the ones who can take life and take your money. So the religious leaders are saying, we can't take this man's life. But the reality is, if you've been reading John, what did they try to do just a couple chapters earlier? Twice in one chapter, they tried to stone Jesus. So they do try to take matters in their own hands. But when they realize it's not going to happen, they want to take Jesus to Pilate. So the Roman government, again, says there's two things that conquered people cannot do. Execute or do tax assessment. So Pilate says, take him by yourself, judge him by your own law. But we have no right to execute, the Jews said. This happened so that the words that Jesus had spoken, indicating the kind of death he would die. Earlier, Jesus talked about the fact that he would die on a cross. That he would be lifted up like Moses had lifted up the snake in the desert. We talked about that about 2 months ago. The snake in the desert with Moses being lifted up. So when the Jewish leaders were trying to stone him, that would not have fulfilled what God had set up, prophesied about in the Old Testament of how the death of the Messiah would take place, of hanging on a tree. Because the Old Testament talks about anybody that dies on a tree is cursed. Cursed from God. So we have here in John 10 and 11, the leaders seek 2 times to try to kill Jesus. And I just find it ironic. When I look at it, it's so ironic. But then I look at my own life. And I think, how often don't I, maybe, I got that one hand, I'm walking in relationship with Christ. And the other hand, I blow up. Or I do something that the WWJD, I would not want Jesus or anybody else to know about. And if I do that, I'm wondering maybe if some of you at times do that. We struggle in these two worlds that we walk. Well, we go on with verse 33. Pilate then went back inside the palace, and he summoned Jesus and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said, "Is that your own idea, or did others ask you to talk? Or did others talk to you about me?" It's thought. Now, I've only heard this a couple of places. One was when I was going to college at Reformed Bible College, now Kuiper College in Grand Rapids. The Greek professor there often talked about the fact that it was his belief that Jesus would have been the king, like Prince Charles. Well, Charles sort of lost it now, but it's going to be the next guy, whatever his name is. Who's the younger one? Just got married? William, yep. It's going to probably go down. But the thought is, there is some thought out there that through Joseph's line and Mary's line, Jesus would have been the king. And we don't know that for sure because in 70 A.D., the Romans came through and they destroyed the temple, and that's where all the records were kept. I mean, if that was the case, I think it's pretty cool, pretty awesome how God set it up like that. But we also do know that Christ is the king. He is the King of Kings. So Jesus says, is that your idea, or did somebody tell you about me? And Pilate says, am I a Jew? Remember all the problems he's having with the Jews for the last 7, 8 years? Am I a Jew? I'm not a Jew. No. It was your people and your chief priests who handed you over to me. What is it that you have done? Hear Pilate being a little bit befuddled. What have you really done? I mean, yeah, if you say you're a king, but you sure don't look like a king to me. Why did they hand you over to me? And Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jews. But now my kingdom is from another place. And Pilate says, you are a king then. This is the charge that the religious leaders were trying to get Christ tried on, I believe. Because if there was an insurrection, if you were in rebellion against Rome, you could be executed. Sort of like even in America today, right? We have the death penalty for people who have treason against America. So the religious leaders were hoping they could get Pilate to see that Jesus said he was the king of the Jews. That would be enough for Pilate to say, here's the warrant for your arrest. You have to die. But it's interesting because, again, Pilate is befuddled by all of it. And Pilate sees what's going on. He sees through the schemes of the Jewish people. We read verse 37. Jesus answered, you are right in saying that I am a king. For in fact, this reason I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me. Now, I didn't teach on the snapshot of where Jesus talks about, I am the good shepherd. But if you know those passages in that chapter, when he says, I am the good shepherd, and the sheep follow me, and the sheep know my voice. The sheep know my voice. So Jesus is saying here, everyone on the side of truth, everyone who is a sheep, who is with me, who walks with me, knows my voice, knows what truth is. And Pilate says here, and this is a great thing that people have talked about for 2,000 years. Pilate says, what is truth? Well, in some respects, this can be asked 3 different ways, or looked at 3 different ways. The one is, Pilate simply said, what is truth? What is truth? What does truth look like? Well, I think we go the verse earlier when he says, those on the side of truth, listen to me. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. So right there, if Pilate's asking what is truth, Christ has already answered what truth is. He is the truth. But there's also the fact here that it's thought that Pilate might be cynical. Might be saying, what is truth? Here you got the religious leaders who want to follow all the religious laws, and they got to do all these things right so they can eat the Passover and do all their sacrifices, but they're bringing you here for me to call for your execution. What is truth? There's no truth in this mess, is there? Isn't it all convoluted, Pilate's thinking? That's one way it's looked at. That it's a cynical question. The other way that it's also looked at is what is truth? There's the way the Greek is written, it can refer to the fact that Pilate is saying, what is the weight of truth? You know, when we think about the legal scales, you have the lady who's blind, and she has the scales on both sides, and things get weighed. Pilate, maybe, it's thought, is saying, what is the weight of truth? Is truth really worth anything here? Because the reality is, I see that you are an innocent man. The truth is, I see the innocence. But they're calling for your death. So what is the weight of truth? Jesus responds. Jesus responds and says, Pilate, with this he went out again to the Jews and he said, I find no basis for a charge against him. But it is your custom for me to release to you a prisoner at the time of the Passover. do you want me to release the King of the Jews? And they shouted back, no, not him, give us Barabbas. Growing up, I always thought that the same crowd that was there on Palm Sunday was the crowd that was there on Friday morning. As I've gotten older, I think it's probably a different crowd. They're doing this early in the morning. Common person's probably more at home. They're sleeping. They're just getting ready. They're getting their kids set. I think there was a different crowd there from Palm Sunday to Friday morning. And they call for Barabbas. It's interesting because Barabbas, his name means son of the Father. Ooh, get that, son of the Father. It also means son of a rabbi. Isn't that amazing? Jesus, who is the son of the Father, has to die for us. Barabbas, who is son of a father, son of a rabbi, is set free. Barabbas, who actually, it's believed, was involved in insurrection, a revolt against Rome, who should have died according to Roman law, was set free. Jesus Christ, who was innocent, paid the price. So we see that taking place. And what we see here is Pilate failed to take a firm stand for what he knew was right. Pilate failed to take a firm stand for what he knew was right. He knew that Jesus was innocent. He knew it, but he was so befuddled that he did not take the stand for what is right, what was right. And I ask the question of you. I ask it of me. How often maybe do we know what's right, but we don't take a stand? We know what's right theologically, biblically. We know what's right within our moral lifestyle and how we're called to live. We know what's right and what we should do or what somebody else that we're called to share with. But what do? We fail to take a stand. And we compromise a little bit of who we are. We're going to see that Pilate continued to compromise. But what did it gain him? So Pilate here fails to take a firm stand for what he knew was right. Chapter 19, verse 1 says this. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. It's thought that Pilate was thinking. Sometimes we get in trouble when we try to think what somebody else is thinking. But the thought is that Pilate has Jesus flogged because then he might appease the religious leaders. Not kill Jesus, but hey, let's whip him. Let's sort of do some really horrific things to him. And then the religious leaders will say, okay, we're done with it. Don't worry about it anymore. He had Jesus flogged. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns. They put it on Christ's head. They clothed him in purple robe. And they went up to him again and again, saying, Hail, King of the Jews! And they struck him in the face. Once more, Pilate came out and said to the Jews, Look, I'm bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him. Pilate knew what was right, but he didn't follow what he knew. There's no charge. And Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, Here is the man. Here's the man. Well, I understand the next point there of that Pilate failed to heed God's warning. Number one, he has the reality in his whole heart. His own heart, he knows that Jesus is innocent. But number two, in Matthew chapter 27, it says this. For Pilate knew it was out of envy that the religious leaders handed Jesus over to him. Then Pilate was sitting in the judge's seat, and Pilate's wife sent him this message. Don't have anything to do with that innocent man, for I have suffered a great deal today in a dream because of him. I don't know if you can see very well, but we have Pilate's wife sort of walking away from Pilate up there. Or maybe you can see it on the picture here. Pilate's wife is turning around and walking away because she has been warned in the dream, don't do anything to this man. But Pilate doesn't listen to his wife. I was told by the Bible study group on Wednesday night, I probably shouldn't go here, but how many of us men fail to listen to our wives at times? Okay, there's a couple of honest guys here, and usually when we don't listen to our wife, we get into trouble. Yeah, I know, yeah. Oh, not UCB? I get into trouble, I know, because typically Sue has sometimes a better feeling or judgment on some issues. Pilate does not listen to the warning of his wife. He doesn't listen to that warning in his own heart that says that this man is innocent. He fails to heed God's warnings. Then we go to verse 19, chapter 6. Verse 19, chapter 6? Chapter 19, verse 6. I'll get that right. As soon as the chief priests and the officials saw him, they shouted, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Isn't hatred powerful? Hatred can eat away at who we are. Hatred is hard to break. Hatred blinds us to other people. I mean, if you have a hate for somebody else, you are probably blinded to them. No matter what the other person does, they can be the greatest person in the world, but if you hate them, you're blinded to who they are. Or maybe you have somebody in your life that treats you like that they hate you. And it's like, well, why? And that hatred blinds us. Or blinds somebody else. And we think that hatred hurts them, but who does that hatred really hurt? Ourselves. It destroys and it ruins and it tears down who we are. So when we hold on to hatred of somebody else, it's not hurting them, we're hurting ourselves. The Jewish leaders have such a hatred to Jesus Christ that it doesn't destroy Jesus, because we know that he came for his death and resurrection, but it destroys the Jewish people. It poisons the person who hates more than the person who is being hated. Remember what Christ says when he's on the cross. He says, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they do." Christ is still offering them forgiveness, not hatred back. So they're calling, "Crucify, crucify." Pilate answers, "You take him, you crucify him. As for me, I find no basis for a charge against him." Again, he sees that he's innocent. The Jews insisted, "We have a law. And according to that law, he must die because get this. What charge did the Jewish people want to bring on Jesus? That he said he was a king in revolt against Rome. Pilate figures that's not true. This is the actual charge. The problem is, this charge is not a charge which would warrant the death penalty from Pilate. He could not give the death penalty for this charge. He claims that he is the Son of God. In other words, he is claiming blaspheming. Well, then Pilate heard this. He was even more afraid. This is interesting. He was more afraid. Why was he more afraid now? He goes back inside and he says to Jesus, "Where do you come from?" But Jesus gave him no answer. Do you think he was saying to Jesus, "Hey, Jesus, where were you born? In Jerusalem or in Judea or Galilee? Where do you hail from? What was your family life like?" No, he wasn't. Think about the Roman religious system. They adapted the Greek system, the pantheon of all the various gods. And if you know that system and have studied that system, how often doesn't one of the gods come down and have sex with a female human and they have a baby? Think about Hercules, right? Hercules is the son of Zeus and the daughter of, I have no idea, but some woman, some earthly woman. So Pilate is looking at this now, not necessarily thinking, where are you from physically, but are you a child of a god? Are you a Hercules? Are you one of these that we should be worshiping? Are you one of these that we have in our pantheon of gods within all of our temples around the Roman Empire? But Jesus gives him no answer. Jesus, I'm sorry, I got lost on my notes. Jesus gives him no answer. Maybe because I'm getting old. I don't know how many, none of you probably know this. There are some of you that might remember this. Today is my 15th year being here. I came on the 15th of March. And today is the 23rd of March. So it's been 15 years. I didn't mean that for that. I just meant, it's, like a lot of us, we're getting older and the mind just doesn't quite connect up like it maybe did when I was 38 years old when I first came here as the pastor. So, 15 years. Man. Anyway, that helps me get back where I am in my notes. Okay, chapter 19, verse 11. Jesus answered, "You would have no power over me if it were not given to you from..." Oh, Pilate says, I'm sorry, Scott. Pilate says, the end of that last verse, do you refuse to speak to me? Do you refuse to speak to me? Don't you realize I have the power to free you or destroy you, to kill you? And then Jesus said, you have no power over me if it were not given to you. I love that. You have no power over me. Okay, another little side thing. How many of you caught the news this last week that science has figured out that the universe was created, bang? Any of you reading the articles in the news about, they thought before that the universe has expanded at a certain rate and speed throughout the time of the creation with the Big Bang. They just found out that it took place within about a second. That the universe, faster than the speed of light, the universe was created. And one of the articles that I read was the guy that came up with the term, the Big Bang Theory. He is not a Christian. But in the article, he talks about, he's wondering if there was an intelligent being behind the Big Bang to take place so quickly. I'm reading the article, I'm thinking, I know the intelligent being. I know it. In the beginning, God created. God. And what does Jesus say? This all fits, follow me. This fits. And what does Jesus say? Pilate, you have no power, but God gives you the power. God is the one who's given us the power. God is the one who gave Pilate power. God is the one who gives you and I life. So from then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free. But the Jews kept shouting, if you let this man go, you're no friend to Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar. Okay, remember, 3 times Pilate was already in trouble with the Jews. Once he got called back to Rome, hand slapped. Pilate's valuing the wrong things. If he sticks up for this man Jesus, the Jewish leaders are going to go back to Rome. He's going to be losing his job. He's going to be losing his pension. His job security is going to be out the window. Do you see how the things that took place prior to what we read in Scripture are having an impact on this time? Pilate valued the wrong things. His job security. No, his job and his security. And then I ask, do I sometimes value the wrong things? Do you sometimes value the wrong things? Those things that really don't matter in the scheme of eternity. But we think it's so important at the time. And sometimes those things are the things that we simply compromise on again. Pilate thinks that Jesus is innocent, so he compromises. There's all these little slides of compromising. And where are you and I with valuing the right things or the wrong things? It was the day of preparation of Passover week, about the 6th hour. And Pilate said, here is your king. Pilate says, I'm done. Here's your king. Got to go back to Matthew. In Matthew 27, it talks about Pilate says to the Jewish leaders, I find nothing wrong with the man. And Pilate then called for a bowl of water, which was not a Roman custom, but it's a custom from the Old Testament. So how Pilate knew this, I don't know. But in the Old Testament, it talks about if somebody is murdered and they cannot find the murderer in the area, the local area, the elders from the closest town where that person was murdered need to take a bowl of water and wash their hands and say, we are innocent of this man's blood. Deuteronomy 21, I believe it is. Pilate takes the water and he says, I am innocent of this man's blood. You do with him what you want to do with him. Well, we read then, they shouted, "Take him away! Take him away! Crucify him!" And Pilate says, "Shall I crucify your king?" And they say, "We have no king but Caesar." Who do you follow? They're claiming to follow Yahweh God, but when they say we have no king but Caesar, they're placing Caesar. They're placing their hatred for Jesus above their relationship with God. What do you and I actually follow more than Jesus Christ? What are we placing up above Jesus Christ in our life? You see, whatever that is, we've got to remove it. Because there can only be one king on my heart. There can only be one king on your heart. There can be only one Pilate. I get frustrated with when I see that little bumper sticker that says, "God is my co-pilot." Man, I don't want to be the pilot. I'd rather have God as the pilot, and I want to be a passenger in the back of the plane. He's got to be the king. The Jewish leaders are saying, Caesar is our king. They have just blown their whole faith tradition out of the water by swearing allegiance to a Roman emperor who they declared Romans believed the emperor was a god. So they just put a declared God above Yahweh God. And I wonder about you and I at times. Do we place something else over at times who God is in our life? So Pilate handed him over to them to be crucified, and the soldiers took charge of him, and they crucified him. You see, Pilate in his life, he compromised so much, but according to Pilate's death, or at the end of Christ's death, resurrection, ascension, is when Pilate, as I said, he had the Samaritans killed. He was then called back to Rome, and we really don't know how Pilate died. Some people say he was called back to Rome, he was exiled, and told to